Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Part 4, S1 as Fundamental Value Space. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. We are in Episode 8, the pure abstract language. In Part 1, we began exploring phi as a pure mathematical creature. In Part 2, we understood phi as pure potential, the silent alphabet ready to speak but not yet speaking. In Part 3, we discovered shift symmetry, the principle that only differences in phi matter, not absolute values. We learned that adding the same constant to phi everywhere is like transposing a melody to a new key without changing its character. Today, in Part 4, we ask a deeper question. Where do phi's values actually live? Not in physical space, but in a value space, the space of all possible values that phi can take. And here we meet something beautiful and powerful. Phi's values do not live on an infinite straight line. They live on a circle. Mathematicians call this circle S1. In this part, we will understand why this circular value space is not just a convenient trick, but essential to the expressive power and internal coherence of the holophase language. Before we draw any pictures, it is worth pausing on this idea of a value space. When I say that phi assigns to every point of the universe a value on a circle, I do not mean there is a little physical circle floating at each point in space. I mean there is an abstract menu of possible values, and that menu itself has a certain shape. Just as temperature at each point can be any number on a thermometer, phi at each point can be any location on a circle. The circle is the shape of possibility, not an object you can bump into. Let us begin gently, with pictures you already know from daily life, and then climb step by step into the abstract view. As always in this journey, I want you to feel the idea in your body and your everyday experience before we name it in the language of mathematics. Imagine two very different tools for measuring time. The first is like a long, infinite ruler. You mark 0 on the left, then 1, 2, 3, and so on to the right, and if you could, you would go on forever. Time is a straight line. Every moment has its unique place, never to repeat. 10 seconds, 10 hours, 10 years are just points along this endless line. The second tool is a simple clock face. It has 12 numbers arranged in a circle. After 12 comes 1 again. After 24 hours, the hands return to the same place. The clock face does not know which day it is. It only knows the phase inside the day. 3 o'clock today and 3 o'clock tomorrow land on the same point of the circle. Which of these tools better captures the feeling of daily life? In one sense, both are true. Time does move forward. Yesterday is gone, tomorrow is not yet here. But at the same time, our lives are filled with cycles: days, weeks, months, seasons, heartbeats, breaths, routines. The circle of the clock captures that repeating structure in a way the straight line cannot. The ruler remembers how far you have traveled since the beginning. The clock remembers where you are in the cycle right now. Phi's value space is like the clock face, not the infinite ruler. When we say phi maps each point of the universe to a value, we do not mean a value on a straight line that goes off to plus or minus infinity. We mean a point on a circle, a phase on a dial. Once we understand this, a huge amount of the richness of physics end of the Holophase language, becomes almost inevitable. Notice also how different this is from saying phi lives in space. Physical space is where things are located here, there, near, far. Value space is where the possibilities of phi are located. One is about positions, the other is about states. The same physical point can host many different phi values over time, just as the same room can hold many different conversations. The circle we are talking about is a circle of states, not a circle you can walk around with your feet. To see what living on a circle really means, imagine standing in the middle of a round running track. Around you, there is a white line marking the lane. You pick one point and paint a little mark there. You call that mark 0. Now you start walking around the track. After one full lap, you arrive back at the same painted mark. You might say you walked a distance of 1 round. If you keep walking, you can do 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 10 rounds. But every time you complete an integer number of rounds, you arrive at the same place on the track. This is what it means for a value space to be circular and closed. You can keep moving in one direction forever, and yet you keep returning to where you began. Numbers like 0, 2 pi, 4 pi, minus 2 pi are different names for the same physical position on the circle. Just as north, 360 degrees, and minus 360 degrees all point in the same direction on a compass. If you want another picture, think of directions on Earth. You can describe a direction as north, northeast, east, southeast, and so on. These directions naturally form a circle. If you start at north and keep slowly turning clockwise, you eventually come back to north without ever seeing an edge of possible directions. The space of directions is circular. Phi values behave more like directions than like heights on a wall. Now, why should phi's values be like that? Why not just let phi take any real number on a straight line and be done with it? The first answer comes from something we already know: shift symmetry. In part 3, we saw that adding a constant to phi everywhere does not change anything that can be measured. Only differences in phi matter. If we draw phi values on a straight line, we must constantly remind ourselves that sliding the whole pattern left or right makes no difference. The line has a lot of wasted structure that the language never uses. If instead we draw phi values on a circle, this sliding becomes a natural rotation. Adding the same constant to phi everywhere simply rotates every point around the circle by the same angle. No point on the circle is special. There is no absolute zero. We are free to start our measurement anywhere. The symmetry we already discovered in the language fits perfectly with the circular value space. The circle takes what was an artificial redundancy on the line and turns it into a graceful, built-in rotation symmetry. The second answer comes from waves and rhythms, which run through everything in our universe. Think of a simple wave on a string. Pick one point and watch it. The string goes up, then down, then back to where it started, and then repeats. That motion is not just higher and lower on a straight line. It is a cycle. It has a phase. You can say the wave is at the top, crossing the middle going down, at the bottom, crossing the middle going up. These positions are naturally arranged in a circle, not a line. If you try to describe such a cycle with a straight line value space, you will keep writing numbers like 0, 1, 0, minus 1, 0, 1, 0, minus 1. The straight line cannot see that the pattern has returned to its starting point in a deeper sense. It just sees numbers going up and down. But if you place the values on a circle and follow the arrow of the phase, you see a smooth rotation. The circle reveals the unity of the cycle. Or think of riding a bicycle along a quiet road. Your legs push the pedals in circles. If you filmed just the vertical position of your foot, it would go up and down on a straight line. But inside your body, you know you are moving through a full circle again and again. The circle is the true story. The up and down is only its shadow. In the holophase language, phi is the master phase. Its values must be able to capture all possible rhythms and cycles. A circle is the simplest shape that can do this while also respecting shift symmetry. A straight line could imitate cycles, but it would always be carrying extra, meaningless information. Which particular lap number you are on, when only your current position in the cycle matters. Let us now connect this more explicitly to our three echoes: time, space, and motion. From the time perspective, if phi lives on a circle, then a simple steady change in time looks like a constant angular speed around that circle. Imagine the hand of a clock sweeping smoothly around the dial. If the time derivative of phi, which we call omega, is constant, phi spins at a constant rate around the circle. Because the circle closes on itself, the pattern in physical space repeats. This is precisely what periodic motion is, the same configuration returning again and again after equal time intervals. The combination of a circular value space and a steady omega gives you the heartbeat of oscillation. Without the circle, a constant slope would never naturally repeat. It would just race off to infinity. You can feel this in everyday devices. The blinking of a turn signal in a car, the hum of alternating current in a wall socket, the ticking of a metronome, all of them can be seen as phi running around the circle at a roughly steady speed. What matters is not the absolute angle of phi, but where you are in the beat. From the space perspective, if phi lives on a circle, then differences in phi between points become phase differences. Two locations might both have the same phi value, meaning they are in phase. Or they might have values opposite each other on the circle, meaning they are out of phase by half a turn. When two waves overlap, whether they reinforce or cancel each other depends on their phase difference. If both waves push the medium up at the same time, they add. If one pushes up while the other pushes down, they cancel. The circle of phi's values makes those comparisons natural and geometrical. You can literally imagine arrows on a circle adding tip to tail to decide whether patterns reinforce or oppose one another. You have seen these space patterns in ripples on a pond when two stones fall in, and in the bright and dark bands of light in a simple diffraction experiment. Where the phases line up, the pattern is bright or high. Where they oppose, the pattern is dim or flat. The circular value space is hiding behind those stripes. From the motion perspective, as a structure moves through space and time, its phi value can trace a helical path, rotating around the circle while also traveling along a line in space. You can imagine a screw turning as it advances into wood, or a planet orbiting while the whole solar system moves through the galaxy, tracing out a spiral path. This is not just a nice picture, it reflects how patterns in phi propagate. The circle of values and the straight line of space together give you the geometry of wavefronts, spirals, and many other patterns that we see in fluids, plasmas, galaxies, and even in patterns of traffic or crowds. Many of the most beautiful shapes in nature, shells, hurricanes, spiral galaxies, can be understood as straight line motion combined with circular phases. Now, step back and ask, where in the master tree of derivatives does this circle live? It does not appear as a derivative. It does not sit on a branch. It is more basic than that. The circle is the shape of the field's value space, the kind of paper on which the entire tree is drawn. Earlier, we used the metaphor of soil. You can plant the same seed in different soils and get different root structures. Here, phi is the seed, and S1, the circle, is the soil. Because the values of phi live on a circle, its derivatives inherit properties that would not arise if the values lived on a line. For example, when you walk around a loop in physical space and track phi, you can come back to the same point in space, but find that phi has turned around the circle one or more times. You have what is called a winding number. That winding number is an integer, a whole number, and it is stable. You cannot remove it with a smooth deformation unless you cut or tear the field somewhere. This simple fact, that continuous fields valued on a circle can carry integer winding, lies behind many phenomena that in physics we later call quantization. quantized vortices in superfluids, flux lines in superconductors, topological charges in field theory. All of these are shadows of the same underlying idea. A map from physical space into a circle can wrap around the circle an integer number of times. You do not need the technical language to feel the essence of this. Think again of walking around the running track while watching a flag on a pole in the middle. If you walk once around, you have turned once all the way around the flag. If you walk twice around, you have turned twice. You can count how many turns you have made without ever needing to mark the ground with numbers. That count is a winding number, and it is always an integer. You cannot turn 1.5 times around the flag without either stopping halfway through your second lap or redefining what once around means. Because phi lives on a circle, and because physical paths and loops are everywhere in a connected universe, winding numbers are not exotic exceptions. They are natural, ever-present possibilities in the language. They provide the abstract skeleton for all kinds of counted phenomena. Numbers of vortices, numbers of twists, numbers of defects, numbers of times a pattern wraps around some core. At this point, it is worth pausing and asking a falsifiability question. We are claiming that the fundamental value space of phi is circular, not linear. How could that turn out to be wrong? What sort of evidence would force us to change this assumption? One way this could fail would be if we found a phenomenon that behaves like a phase, but never wraps around. Imagine a system where being ahead by one full cycle is fundamentally different from being back at the starting point, even after a perfect repetition. That would suggest that the state space is more like an infinite spiral than a closed circle. Another way it could fail would be if we discovered charges or winding-like quantities that could take any real value, not just integer values, and where those values could not be explained as averages or mixtures of integer windings. A different challenge would be if we found that a single circle is not enough. Perhaps some phenomena require two independent phases that cannot be merged into one. The natural value space for two independent circular degrees of freedom is not a single circle, but a torus, like the surface of a donut. If our best descriptions of reality kept insisting on such extra structure, we would have to upgrade our picture. The holophase language is flexible enough to allow that, but the simplest, most economical starting point is a single circle. We should also be honest that our claim is not just aesthetic. It is a scientific proposal. It says, wherever you see phase-like behavior in physics, it should in principle be writable as a story about phi moving on a circle. If one day experiments show persistent patterns that absolutely refuse to fit into any circular description, then we must admit that our value space was too simple. This openness to correction is a strength of the holophase approach, not a weakness. So when we say phi's values live on a circle, we are not closing off the possibility of richer structures. We are stating a clear, testable starting point. If reality pushes back, the holophase language has room to grow. And if reality keeps agreeing, then this simple circle continues to earn its place at the foundation. If you want to explore the mathematical details of these topological possibilities, you can search for Holophase on Zenodo, where the formal papers behind this audio journey are available. For now, let us stay with the circle and see just how far it already takes us. Across scales, circular value spaces appear again and again. At the quantum scale, the overall phase of a wave function is circular. Adding a full term does nothing. Relative phases produce interference, and certain integer multiples of phase around loops lead to observable effects. In the physics of materials, the phase of an order parameter in a superconductor or a superfluid lives on a circle, giving rise to quantized vortices and persistent currents. In optics, the phase of a light wave is circular, and interference patterns in a double-slit experiment are patterns in phase rather than in some absolute number. If you zoom out to the scale of engineering and technology, the same circle appears in very practical ways. Radio engineers talk about phase when they tune antennas and design communication systems. Sound engineers speak of phase when they line up microphones to avoid echoes and cancellations. In all these cases, the numbers they use could have been written on a straight line, but everyone involved knows that adding a full turn changes nothing. They instinctively work with circular phases. At the scale of life, our bodies are full of cycles that can be described by phases on circles. Your circadian rhythm has a phase that tells you where you are in your roughly 24-hour cycle. Your heartbeat carries a phase as it moves from filling to pumping to resting and back again. Different cells in your body might be at different phases of their own cycles, but all those cycles can be mapped onto circles. In the sky, the position of the sun on the daily circle, the phase of the moon over its month, the tilt of the earth through its seasons, all naturally live on circles. Even in human culture and thought, we love to draw wheels and cycles. We speak of cycles of history, economic booms and busts, emotional cycles of stress and rest, creative cycles of inspiration and recovery. Of course, these are analogies, not strict physical phases, but they show how deeply the idea of circular value spaces resonates with our experience. When something important in our lives keeps returning, a mood, a challenge, a lesson, we instinctively describe it as coming back around. The key recognition skill for this part is simple. Whenever you see a pattern that repeats, ask yourself if there is a way to label its state by a point on a circle, such that coming back to the same point on the circle really means same kind of state in the phenomenon. If the answer is yes, you are seeing a circular value space in action. You can even turn this into a small game with yourself. The next time you notice a pattern, a sound, a habit, a schedule, a signal on a screen, ask, is this better drawn as a straight line or as a circle? If the beginning and the end of the pattern feel like the same place dressed in a new moment, the circle is probably the right picture. If the end feels like a new, irreversible place, then the straight line may be better. Learning to choose the circle or the line is part of becoming literate in the holophase way of seeing. When you look at a clock, you are literally seeing S1 in your kitchen. When you watch a fan spinning and notice that after a while you cannot tell how many full turns it has made, you are seeing that addition of full turns does not change the state. When you listen to a song and feel its beat, you are tracking a phase that runs around the circle with each bar of music. When you notice that sunrise after sunrise shares a common structure, even though each day is unique, you are feeling the circular component of time. When you notice that your own attention or mood seems to have good hours and tired hours in a day, you are touching a personal phase on a daily circle. As we close this part, let us return once more to phi itself. We began with phi as a pure mathematical creature, a map from the universe into some value space. We saw that we can understand phi as pure potential, the silent alphabet ready to write any story. We learned that only differences in phi matter, thanks to shift symmetry. Now, in this part, we have discovered that the value space itself has a shape, a circle. That circle makes shift symmetry natural, makes oscillation natural, makes phase natural, and makes quantization natural. We have not added new substances or new kinds of things. We still have only one field, phi, and its derivatives. What we have done is deepen our understanding of where phi lives. It lives on a circle, and that simple topological fact quietly powers a huge amount of what is possible in the universe. Whenever we later speak of waves, interference, resonances, or topological charges, we are really seeing the circle of phi shining through the details. Remember, everything we have talked about is still just one field, phi, and its infinite tower of derivatives, the single language the universe uses to write every story. In Episode 8, we are examining this language in its pure abstract form, before it writes any particular world. With Part 4, we have climbed another step up the master tree of language, this time by looking beneath the tree and understanding the shape of the ground it grows from. We have moved from phi can change to phi's possible values form a circle. And that is a profound tightening of our picture. Step back for a moment and notice how far we have already traveled into the holophase master tree of language. We began at the very root, with phi itself. We then recognized its potential to mean, its indifference to absolute zero, and now the circular shape of its value space. We have not yet climbed to the higher, more detailed branches, the rich forest of higher derivatives, but our foundation is becoming very solid and very clear. Very briefly, remember the complete picture of the holophase language so far. There is one cyclic field phi, its first derivatives giving time, space, and motion together, and its higher derivatives branching into an infinite tree of increasingly subtle echoes. In episode 8, we are not yet in physics. We are still in the Platonic realm, studying what this language is before it writes atoms, stars, or brains. Each part you hear is another small piece of that pure abstract architecture. Slowly, step by step, we are becoming literate in it together. In the next part, we will begin Book 8.2, The Abstract Alphabet. We will look at derivatives themselves as pure symbols, change questions that ask, how does phi vary in time, in space, and in mixed ways? We will see omega, k, and their higher cousins, not yet as frequency or wavelength or curvature in a physical sense, but as letters in a code that has not yet been spoken by any particular universe. We will begin to walk the branches of the master tree, knowing now that every branch grows from a circular root. For now, as you move through your day, notice the circles around you and within you. Notice every rhythm, every cycle, every return. See each of them as a small window into the deeper fact that the language of reality is written on a circle. Phi lives on S1. The universe is what happens when that circle begins to move, to wrap, to wind, and to sing through its derivatives. And you, listening to this, are already learning to hear those circular patterns everywhere. Salam, and peace be upon you.